Ashford, Vice President of Sales and Marketing. I would like to welcome everyone to today's Go Mobile webinar. Before I introduce today's presenters, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. Because of the number of attendees we have on today's webinars, everyone's phones will stay on mute. If you have any questions during the webinar, please enter them in the question window that you see in the lower right of your screen. We'll try to answer everyone's questions at the end of the webinar. If we're unable to get to everyone's questions, we'll follow up with everyone individually via email. Today's webinar is being recorded. As soon as the recording is available, we'll post it on the customer content page of our website and send you a message to let you know when it's available to be downloaded. On that note, I would like to introduce today's presenters. We've got Rob Pierce, our Vice President of Professional Services, and Chris Lemonier, our Vice President of Technology, to give you an overview of our mobile access options. On that note, take it away, Rob and Chris.
Good morning, everyone. This is Rob, and
good morning. This is Chris.
So in today's presentation, we're going to make it a little bit less presentation-like, a little bit more informal, kind of a dialogue between Chris and myself. So there'll be a lot of back and forth as we work our way through the material. This first slide is the classic old Gartner study. You can't have a technology presentation without Gartner here. So it's showing the top 10 strategic technology trends for 2013, and as you can see at the top of the list is 2 items around the concept of mobility. So we're just setting the big picture. Mobility is obviously a hot topic. You know, why mobile? We're not going to try to sell you on it today. There's lots of articles out there expressing why mobility is making a difference to companies' bottom lines. When we look at a lot of the mobile trend data, there's talking about, you know, smartphones have been in expansion mode for a while. If you look at tablets, I think the first quarter of this year, sales had doubled the first quarter of last year. So this build out of the hardware is continuing to grow. We're not even near market saturation. Everybody is predicting that we're kind of at the lower end of this growth curve of all of these mobile devices going out into the market. And this slide is really just making the point that mobility is certainly nothing new. We've had devices, dedicated devices around for quite a while, beepers and pagers and scanners and, you know, UPS with their electronic signature pads. So there's been all these application-specific devices around for quite a while. And then, as you all know, the smartphone came out around 2006, 2007. Then there was the whole BlackBerry bringing on email and whatnot. And now we're moving into the world of more mobile, portable PCs and tablets. And kind of what's changed throughout this evolution is that instead of the device driving the usage, now we're moving to these generic usage devices. These PCs and tablets, you could use them for a lot of different purposes.
Yeah, the one thing I want to really emphasize here is that in this mobile evolution continuum, as Rob was alluding to, you know, that we've always been pursuing the idea that whatever, I always think of it like the best camera you have is the one you have with you. So it's always been looking at making computers more and more accessible at the point at which you actually were going to need to input data or retrieve information. So as the mobile devices have built out, become smaller or more accessible, so has the infrastructure behind the scenes. As we move through, you know, the idea of a network connection that meant a cable to the wall into the idea of Wi-Fi in the late 90s, now into cellular networks, then into 3G, and now LTE, all technologies that enable that transfer of data at higher and higher speeds. Meanwhile, the technology to make these devices smaller and smaller has come down, the cost has come down, the capabilities have gone up. So when you look at nowadays at an iPhone or a smartphone, an iPhone or an Android device, really and truly, they're really not phones at all. They call them phones because they have that capability, but they're really just small computers. So these are computers with the capability of what was on the desktop, you know, just a few years ago. In fact, I read a statistic that said the iPhone 5 now has the same capabilities that a laptop did 5 years ago as far as the hardware specifications. So In that paradigm of changing, you also change the way you interact with these devices. Obviously, even though a laptop and an iPhone are similar from a technology perspective, what they're capable, when you get inside, it's still a central processor and memory and all those things. What really changed is the human interaction. So where you might be using a pointing device, a touchpad, or a mouse, and we'll talk about that a little bit, it changed to being your finger. So they've also had to evolve the UI as we've moved through this evolution of what is a mobile device and how we interact with it.
Yeah, so as these mobile devices have become application specific to more general purpose devices, what they're saying is really we're at the forefront of mobility, because what's going to really make them adopt in the market is the software. What do you do with these things? The whole world of application development is just exploding right now, and this is I'm going to turn it back over to Chris.
Yep. So one of the things I wanted to talk about today is, when is an app an app? I've been quite entertaining that the idea of the term app or application is so, to hear teenagers and things talk about this app or that app's unusual. In my experience, it's a relatively new thing in the last 4 or 5 years, especially as the app stores like Apple's iTunes app stores, as well as Android, that's Google's Android devices, Google Play app store has come available. But basically, you're delivering a user experience or an application out to a mobile device or a laptop or a desktop computer. What's different is now people are beginning to develop applications and software, and this is the more recent shift, to take advantage of the user interface. So if you think about it, when you're using an application on your desktop or on your laptop, you're using what they call a one-pixel pointer. Basically, you're moving around a mouse, and it's moving an arrow on the screen, and you can make very precise selections in the user interface. So you can choose this button or expand a window, that kind of thing. And when mobile devices first came out, when Rob was showing that continuum, especially in the late 1990s, early 2000s, they were tablet computers, but they used that interface. So what happened is you ended up using either a stylus or something like that. It's kind of awkward to use on those devices. So later, in the last few years, you're beginning to see devices designed for the pointer you have with you all the time. And if you want to know what that is, just hold your hand out in front of you and look at your pointer finger. That's the now pointing device that we're using. Needless to say, it's not one pixel. It's much larger, and it can be awkward to use on those kinds of interfaces. So everybody had to rethink how they were interacting, and that created this environment or this idea of mobile designed or mobile optimized applications. So I want to talk about 4 kind of categories, and then I'm going to give some examples using the New York Times, so you can kind of see what we're talking about. But this is to help define some language we'll be using in the future with you. The first is the native app. That is an application that was developed for the device. So, for instance, you have an iPhone and you have an iPad. I'll use those as an example. And you have, let's say, an Android Zoom-based device. Each one of those devices needs to have an application written for it. So the iPhone device has a smaller screen than the iPad, so you have to actually build the user elements so they can be used with your finger and all those kinds of things. And the technology kits that were built for creating those native applications for those devices. Simultaneously, there's another camp of development for the mobile devices called the web app. Basically, there's newer technologies that have come out, things you probably may have heard of at some point, HTML5 for the geeks out there, CSS3. These are languages built to create web experiences that are device aware. So when you go to a website, the website knows that you're on a device like an iPhone or you're on a device like an iPad, and it changes the experience from what you might see on the desktop. So the idea is that the application's capabilities are similar, but its user interface has changed to use your fingers, to use swiping, those kinds of things, instead of just using a point and click. And native apps and web apps native apps were more capable probably 3 or 4 years ago. Now native apps and web apps are getting to the same level of capability. The other thing you'll see a lot of is skins. That's where somebody took a web application and then developed a user interface modification for the mobile devices. It's a little less sophisticated than a web app, but it's similar. And finally, a lot of people aren't aware that almost all, if not all, of the mobile devices have available to them remote access. For the geeks out there, it would be if you're running a Citrix server or you're running a terminal server, there are clients for the devices. So the devices can access what would be truly the desktop experience. Especially, it's difficult on an iPhone to use something like that, but on an iPad or one of the larger Android tablets, it really makes a lot of sense, and we're going to get some examples of that. But all of these are used in conjunction with each other. We're going to show some Sage development that's going on, as well as we'll talk about some DM2 development, and we're developing in each one of these areas based on the needs and requirements. But what I wanted to show you was an example of the different types. So for instance, this is the New York Times website shown on an iPad device. So if you go to just www.newyorktimes.com, this is what you see, and it does have some wrapper elements designed to be sensitive to the iPad, but still it's pretty much the desktop experience. This is a type of application where it's been optimized for the iPad device. So you'll notice that the buttons at the bottom are larger, designed to be touched with a finger. The touch areas are much larger in the different articles that zoom in on it. So it takes advantage of the idea that you're using your finger as a pointer. Now here's another one of the New York Times apps. This particular one has the top news on the left. You can see it's a button touch with your fingers. You can scroll the article. The buttons at the top of the screen and along the right-hand side have been redesigned for touch with your finger. So go ahead. So if we look at the two app experiences, I ask you which one of those, you guys are experienced with going to, most of you by now are experienced with going to iTunes or the Google Play Store and purchasing an app and downloading it, installing it on your phone. Which one of those do you think is actually the app that you get from the iTunes Store, and which one of those is a web app that New York Times developed? So I'll give you a second to think about that. So the one on the left is actually the App Store one. So you go into the iTunes App Store, you purchase that app, you download it and install it on your phone, you put in your login credentials, and you have the New York Times experience. On the right is actually their new web-based application. You don't get that through the iTunes Store. You actually go to app.newyorktimes.com, you log in, and it puts all this right into the browser window. In fact, the browser window disappears when you start using this web application. A lot of new development is being done in that particular type of setup rather than creating a native app for a number of reasons. In fact, I'm seeing more and more a move. The New York Times' iTunes Store app came first. The web app is newer. And you can see the trend where they're doing all their new development in the web app. The reason is it's platform agnostic. So the web app doesn't care whether you're on an iPad or whether you're on an Android device. It doesn't have to have that specific application creative to have a native app experience. So that for them, that allows faster development. It allows you to do some pretty unique things, and it allows them to leverage those platforms. So if you have a mixed device environment, you're not having to buy the apps multiple times and all that. You just have to log in and you have the application. And they've been able to get one of the big issues has been local data storage. You buy an app and the data is stored locally on your iPad. With the web apps, they're able to, in the new languages that they're using for this, you're able to cache that data locally and use it offline. So you can even read these articles when you're not connected to the internet, even though it's a browser experience. The other advantage of web apps is that it allows for some in-user customization. So I'm able to, if the New York Times wanted to, they could make a customized version of this for a unique customer, and they do have some of this, depending on what business unit you're in. Where your experience might be different than someone else's, and it's much easier to do this and add those features and not have to go through and have 50 different versions of this on the iTunes Store or something like that. So that is, and plus if they make a modification, they can push it out to everybody instantly, and it's really an exciting technology. So you have native apps, you have web apps. They're really hard sometimes to tell the difference. Some of them are hybrids. If those of you who use Facebook, or use ESPN's applications. They're actually hybrids. Some of it is a local app. A lot of it, the data you're using, is actually coming in as a web app. So with all that being said, we've said that when is an app? So you have applications that are installed on the device, and then you have ones that are accessed through an internet browser. One of the questions that we run into quite a bit is this idea of the internet cloud. Last year I gave a presentation similar to this talking about what is a cloud. And that also brings us to the idea of data security. So one of the things I want to do is talk about a little bit of the myth of being cloud-enabled or cloud application. If you think about it, there's really only the user experience. So this is the idea of what device you're using to access the data. Then there's the question of, is that data stored locally on the device, or is the data stored on hardware at another location and you're accessing that data remotely through the internet? So the internet doesn't really store any data. There's no cloud out there with data storage in it. What there are different companies that provide those storage capabilities. So for instance, you might be using an iPad or an iPhone or even a laptop to access our Sage CRM system. The Sage CRM data theoretically could be located, the data that actually feeds that user interface could be located in your own office on-premise. So you have an on-premise server that your IT guys are controlling, that you're coming in and accessing that data on for the user experience of accessing that particular application. That's what's termed a private cloud. So that means just you are using that particular data, and no one else has access to it. So that gives you a heightened level of security. You control the data, you control the user experience, the internet's just a pipe to connect them. You also have, you can take that same back office server and you could do what's called co-location, where you work with a data center someplace and they're going to host a piece of hardware that you own, and then you're going to access it that way. So your mobile device might access a piece of hardware hosted by, I'm just trying to think of a hosting company off the top of my head, but Amazon. Well, Amazon's a little different, but you might you physically bought a piece of hardware and you went to Minicolo as one of them, and you'd actually physically install that piece of hardware. Your IT guys would physically put this thing in their office, and what they give you is they give you redundancy protection, fire protection, security, that kind of thing, and more bandwidth. Then there's another type, which is where it's hosted, like Rob is mentioning, Amazon. Amazon does AWS hosting, and there's companies like Media Temple or Laughing Squid, and that's where you're actually putting your data onto their servers. And they have secure environments and what's called virtual machines and all kinds of things to control that. So with all of that being said, there's also, the applications need to support what's called, you guys have probably all seen it if you use a bank, is HTTPS, which is the communication between your device and the back piece of hardware is encrypted. So the data, when it leaves your device, it gets encrypted when it's connected to the server, whether you're hosting it at your location, whether you've got a piece of hardware at another location, or you're buying space on someone else's server. So any one of those things could be implemented. The other thing is VPN. A lot of people are concerned about creating rather a virtual private network, and of course you want to choose hardware and configurations that support VPN if that's a concern. You can also use these all interchangeably. So you might, whereas you might, like I said earlier, have a web app and an app, you might have some things that are accessed over VPN, some things that require HTTPS security, or you may have some things that are hosted at your location, something might be hosted someplace else. An example, if you're using DM2's eCardLink product, and we're hosting that for you, that data is actually hosted by DM2's data center here in our office in Vancouver. So you have your ERP system in your office, but the data that's being hosted for your customers over eCardLink is hosted here. So there can be a combination of those different things. So when we say the term cloud, or you hear that, you sort of do have to drop a little bit into the details to understand a little more about how you're connecting and how that data is being exchanged.
So this first half of the presentation has been a little bit theoretical, just kind of setting the context for this. So now we're trying to make a transition in the presentation and really bring it down to how does this affect you guys specifically. So we were out there researching, what are all these great business cases for mobility, and the one that seemed to make just the most common sense, plain truth to me was, where are people naturally away from their desks? So this is something that will resonate with most folks. It's your customer's experience. They want to have a remote access to some things that you're providing, like customer self-service portals, maybe consigned station integrations, things that your customers do. They want to be able to do that mobile. So there's one point. Your outside sales team, that's just a natural group of people that are out and about, and the more that they could have access to information or be able to provide data back into the system, that's a great business case. The management team was out and about as well, and they certainly want to keep tabs on what's going on, so mobile business intelligence is another one of those strong trending business cases. Point of sale systems. So today a lot of you have a dedicated terminal up on a counter for your POS system, but this is one of those great use cases where you see the tablets, and we've all probably experienced this in retail environment, where people are using the iPads as basically a cash register. They're swiping cards on it and taking orders and processing the payment right there on tablets. So we'll see some examples of that here. Other places you could think of your warehouse crew. Today they're using one of those older dedicated mobile devices such as a barcode scanner. Well, more and more, just imagine your team with a low-cost iPad out in the warehouse entering their physical counts as they're taking those counts. There's really no reason to write it on a piece of paper and then come back and rekey it. Truck drivers. Chris is going to speak to a piece of development about transferring delivery information and getting back pickup and delivery information from trucks using generic tablets. Or your field service team, dispatching out to them service orders and getting back actual work accomplished. So as we move into this, one of the things Chris mentioned was that whole remote access experience, that you could use a tablet to connect to a terminal service or Citrix environment. This is something that all of our customers could do today. It's been around for quite a while. In the upper left-hand screen of this graphic, I got a pointer, is a little utility called Jump, and it's just a remote desktop utility. There's quite a few of them out there. This is just one example of them. But we could use this to access our own terminal services environment, and we'll show that through this, you can have access to your CRM system, to your back office ERP, you could get to your SQL Data Warehouse solution or Sage Intelligence, your customer web portals, the e-carting portal, Consigned Stations, or Sage is putting out a lot of YouTube channels, so maybe just for an internal training environment for your team. So the point is, this is just something that you can do today. Today, your entire, whoever you want to have a mobile experience, you can have it. So here's an example on an iPad going to the DM2 web portal. So this is where you have your fuel pricing for the dealers, EFT notifications, credit card batch access, sales order history, open invoices, invoice history, account information. There's a lot of capabilities. So this is a customer self-service portal that your customers can access either through the web or they could access it through mobile tablets. This is e-carving, which Chris was talking about, typically hosted at DM2, but I believe we have some customers hosting it themselves. But it's browser-based. Because it's browser-based, you can access it through any tablet or phone. Consigned Stations. So this is the marketer owns the inventory at one of the dealer stations, and they want to get meter readings on a daily basis and generate invoices and the commission splits. That's a relatively new module that we rolled out, but we designed the interface between the office, the marketer's office, and those remote dealer stations is all browser-based. So instead of having some dedicated piece of software to it, we've got this FTP site where that transfer of information can go back and forth. Because it's browser-based, you could do it on a remote device if you like.
One of the things that you'll notice is that, Rob, if you go back one slide, you'll notice that the user experience is considerably different between, for instance, eCardLink and Consigned Stations. Over the next few months, we're actually going to be unifying all of those designs so that you get a common user experience as we begin to bring these applications into and under an umbrella that will be called Petroleum Insights Cloud. So just want to let you know that these things were designed for specific purposes, but they're being brought into that common UI experience that'll be easier to train to, easier for your end users to experience.
On this example, we're on an iPad, and we use that jump utility to access a terminal services environment where the full desktop version of Sage 100, or what was called DM2 Mass, is running. So through a tablet, we have full access to the back office ERP system. You could do everything in this environment that you could do on any PC computer. Go ahead. You going to speak to the pointer?
Yeah. Oh no. Go ahead. If you were going to mention it, I was going to.
Yeah, this gets to Chris's point about, in a desktop you've got the mouse, which has that pixel-specific ability to make selections, whereas the finger would be, much too big to do that accurately on here. So part of this jump utility, what they bring to the table, it's kind of difficult to see, but they give you a pointer enhancement. So this circle right here is kind of where you put your finger, and what you're really controlling is this small little arrow cursor to help you be more precise on your selections. So they're kind of compensating for this mouse finger challenge that we have in devices.
Absolutely. The really nice thing is that, one of the advantages, one of the reasons people love an iPad or an Android device is the battery life. I know on mine, I can go about 2 days without having to recharge it. You also get, they're light, they're portable, they're instant on, you don't have to boot them up. But all that being said, you're not limited to not being able to use your desktop applications. I've found a lot of people don't really know this. Even though I'd say a large, either majority or near majority of our customers already own, you guys already own a terminal server environment, a remote desktop RDP environment, or a Citrix environment that you're using for Mass now. I think Jump is about $19 in the App Store. So you're talking about for a $19 investment, I can have this on my desktop right away and start using it. And you can use your finger for sure. I do all the time. It's just sometimes you get down to a more precise kinds of things, and you need the pointer to help you. The really great thing, though, is that you're getting the full experience. One of the things you run into is where applications, sometimes when they're moved to the mobile devices, because of the user interface of your finger, you'll find that they're somewhat lighter than the desktop applications. They don't have all the functionality. They have a subset of what you use all the time, but sometimes you need a more advanced feature or more advanced thing you can do. You can do it right from here. And I just found a lot of customers didn't really realize that they could do this out of the box with these devices.
So this is using that exact same technology. We're remote desktoping using the Jump utility from an iPad and getting to a terminal services environment where we've got Excel running. And this Excel can be connected to either your SQL data warehouse solution, or it could be running Sage Intelligence. It can be connected to just about anything you want. Today, there's certainly the web app version of Excel up on the cloud, and as Chris was speaking to, it's kind of a light version of Excel. It's not fully featured. In this instance, I could go to a fully featured on-premise version of Excel running on my terminal services and have all of the capabilities of the full integration to my data warehouse or Sage Intelligence. This is the exact same thing. We didn't get the frame on here, but this is running on a tablet, and this is the access to the full version of Sage CRM. So we're going to show you some examples of those light mobile experiences Chris was talking about, but this is having access to the full desktop version, every single feature. So these are all things that are available today, and they have been available for some time.
So on that continuum where I was talking about native applications and web applications and that kind of thing, what we've shown you is the remote access kind of capabilities. In this particular case, this is more in the web app capability, and there are skins too that can be applied to this experience to make the buttons a little larger, that kind of thing. but you're getting Sage CRM is a native web application written for HTML and run in a web browser. In fact, when you're running it on your desktop, you're running it in a web browser. So it's ready to go out of the box for this kind of access, and it's a great tool.
So I promise I'll keep this commercial very quick, but Sage just recently announced that they were selected as the CRM champion. So it was this Infotech, they're a research group kind of like Gartner, and they were looking at various products from a product technology point of view versus a vendor point of view, and Sage came out on top, so we're really proud of that. So, end commercial. Sage CRM has had some mobility options for a while. They've been using that skin technology in the past. If you want to know more about this, everybody's going to get the slide deck, and we've got the links to these sites where you can get more details on these mobility options. So the links are on these individual pages, plus there's a summary page at the end of the deck. So this is kind of their older technology of how they would have access to mobility for phones and tablets.
Now, one of the things I'd like to point out while we're here is that, we're going through a series of applications, sort of an evolution of what's happening with CRM. CRM was the mobile application, then we skinned it out to give you the CRM mobility application view for the iPads and all that. Now, then we're going to move on and talk about some newer things that they're doing. One of the reasons Sage CRM is at the forefront of this and the way it was developed is, if you think about it for a second, Rob was listing all the areas that people look for mobility solutions, and sales tends to be an area that's impacted by this right away. Sales guys are not in the office. They're out, if they're doing their jobs, they're out on the road. They're talking to customers. They're walking through warehouses. They're talking about what kind of products they need and orders. They need that information at their fingertips. So they're, for lack of a better term, sort of on the cutting edge of those mobility tools and access. And also, they spend quite a bit of time on the golf course. So they need to have instant access to that data and can use it anywhere. And they're early adopters for this sort of thing. So it's one of the areas that Sage sees as the vanguard of remote access and development.
Absolutely. So this is something that was recently announced. It's for version 7.2, and there's a lot of other caveats about which version and what types of capabilities it has. But this is their first in the Apple App Store app. It's available to download. So it exists. It's for version 7.2. If people are interested, email us and we'll point you to the right people within DM2 to get more details and all of that. But again, this is moving from a pure browser experience to a skin experience, and now we're in that native app experience. So moving through those different evolutions. Again, this is in the deck. We took some. This is from the iTunes Store itself, and as you guys know, in the iTunes Store, they always give you some sample screenshots of what the product is.
So go back to that slide again. So you guys can go to Sage CRM Sales Lite, and you can see that they even put the word light in there. Remember I was saying that sometimes the native experience will be not as complete. It'll be very thorough and have things you need that you go to the most, but it won't be complete. It won't have every functionality. One thing to remember, though, is that because you use one of these applications, you're not excluded from using the others. So you might have Sage CRM Sales Lite, or you may be using the web application on your you may use this on your iPhone and on your iPad. You may use then the browser access to get to another level, and you probably have Jump there too if you need to go in and do something really special. So think of them in terms of a continuum of applications used to solve a particular problem. You can imagine if CRM was completely implemented like this, and with all the features and capabilities and options and fields and all that, it would become overwhelming of the amount of things you'd have to flip through to get to the right kind of information. So just remember, you could use them in conjunction with each other.
Good point. So Microsoft has an app store, just like Google does, just like Apple does. And something that was recently released is the Windows 8 app for Sage CRM. Sage works directly with the Microsoft team, both their Microsoft Surface, their Excel teams, and their app team. So this is another version of it. It's got kind of that Windows 8 look and feel. And here's how you get to a user guide on this particular product. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Windows 8, but it's got that flat UI, a more modern looking UI. So as we go through and we kind of look at what Sales Tracker is, it's going to look a little bit different than what a typical Apple application might look like. So here's an example of all of the opportunities in their various stages. It's got kind of that tile display of what those opportunities are over on the right. So you click on, one segment of this donut, and then on the right, it's going to display what are the details that makes up that segment.
So that's a good point. As Rob is taking us through these new applications, we recognize, Sage recognizes, and you'll recognize that you're going to work in blended environments. Mobile devices mobile devices are a very personal thing. If you think about it, desktop computers people don't have a emotional attachment to, but laptops people started to have some emotional attachments. I'm sure that people in your organization who love their computer and they take it because they take it everywhere with them and it's in their bag and it's part of their experience. iPads, iPhones, Android devices are like that too. What we're finding is that people will have a blended environment where some people are using iPads, some people are using Android devices, some people are using different Android devices. Maybe they're using a hardened device because they're taking it out into a rough environment. Someone else is using an iPhone because that's all they need. Somebody else has a Windows 8 device because that's what they had at home and they brought it to work, those kinds of things. So we want to try and embrace as best we can all the different platforms that come to play in that kind of environment, the heterogeneousness of the entire IT ecosystem within a company.
So these are just a few more screens of this Windows 8 experience. It's the exact same data. The Apple's app and the Windows app are both coming to your CRM system. It's getting the same data. It's just displaying it in a different UI, user experience. So there's your companies. You could drill down to an individual. There's a list of companies kind of in a tile format. Then you could click on one of them, drill down to a specific company, and then within that company there could be multiple contacts, and you drill down again to an individual person. So Sage has a portfolio of ERP systems, and Sage 100, the platform that DM2 is built on, is one of their key focal areas. It's a very popular ERP system. Sage CRM is now in the SMB market, just took over #1, ahead of Salesforce.com. And in 2011, Sage acquired a business intelligence unit out of South Africa. And this team, Sage Intelligence, they're the ones working directly with Microsoft Excel team and Microsoft Surface team. They have a real interest and focus on providing more mobile BI. So that's something that's still a little bit earlier than CRM. Chris alluded that CRM is always going to kind of be leading the way. It's the natural out-of-the-office experience. But mobile BI is certainly an emerging trend, and we are excited about seeing more on that soon. Point-of-sale systems. So Sage has a mobile payment device. So you plug it into your phone, kind of like Square. I don't know if you've heard of Square, but it's just a little physical hardware thing you plug into the port on the phone, and you could swipe credit cards. Well, you could do that on tablets as well. There's dedicated apps for it. So this has been around for a while. I think the Girl Scouts actually use it. They can take payments on these Sage devices. And we'll be seeing more of this rolling out soon. This is one of those emergent things that Sage is moving forward. So where is DM2 headed?
So what we've been showing is that Sage is really moving it forward on several fronts. I do know that there's some new things coming out from Sage here, and it says down there a little further down, but some new Sage features. We're not at liberty to talk about them yet, but just know that there's going to be some new announcements this year in that space. At the bottom, the Sage Vision video, I highly recommend that you watch that. That'll give you a taste of what Sage is talking about and where they're headed and where they're making their investments. Well, as that technology, and Sage has embraced that technology, that's begun to move DM2 in that direction, as well as you guys. We're getting more and more requests for solutions, and so some areas have begun to emerge that DM2 is focusing in. So we talked about unifying our web applications and the ones we have now. and we're working through that initiative. But the top of the list is the truck solution. We've gotten a lot of requests to provide an iPad-based or a mobile tablet-based solution to have a route in the truck. Well, let's say, first of all, it's downloading the route to the truck. These are the orders that you need to fill. Comes out on the iPad. The truck driver can take it with them to go out and make their deliveries. They can capture bill of lading information. It can capture a signature on a delivery. They can do their truck inspection, all those kinds of things. So we are about, I'd say, 3/4 of the way through a development of a product called Delivery Link. Delivery Link will be a hardware agnostic solution. It is a web application with local data storage, which I was describing earlier. It will run on Androids and iPads. Has a UI built for using, by hand, that kind of thing. It also has a web-based UI that you can use for instance, if you're using a common carrier, so they need to put the information in, they'll be able to use whatever device that they're using. So we decided to make it as open as possible so any kind of device can access it. We're very excited about the product. Over the next couple of months, we'll start to show some screenshots and start to show you functionality. And as we get closer to actually delivering the product, we'll actually give some online demos and do a webinar about it. But it's very exciting, and it's the biggest initiative we have going right now. It will also have mapping and all the kind of things you'd expect as it grows up, and it's going to be a big player for us in the market space. We are looking at doing order capture with e-signature, both part of Delivery Link and separate. So those are that's kind of a big deal. The kind of things you run into is I got to print a ticket, and then the person has to sign the ticket, then I got to get it back. This would be a way to capture signature at point of sale or at point of delivery and have that come back, as well as capture new orders that are coming in. So this is another initiative that we're looking at after we finish up the Delivery Link development. Rob, why don't you talk about it?
Yeah, and warehouse solutions, we don't have anything on the formal agenda, but you could just imagine the physical count experience we talked about, maybe some picking solutions, some shipping solutions. There's a lot of opportunities to address the warehouse stuff. Field service, having real-time dispatch to your service providers out in the field, where to go, what to do, capture what they did. Again, it kind of integrates with the whole remote order entry and signature capabilities. Chris mentioned some Sage stuff coming down the road. It's not that far. I think in the fall they're going to start rolling.
Yeah, I can tell you that the 3 new Sage applications, there's 3 of them that have been developed, are actually in beta testing right now. So they're being tested with customers in the field. They're just doing some refinements on it, and they'll be announcing some things about that real soon this summer, and then into the fall they'll be available. So.
Yeah, and I think the most important item on this list is getting some feedback from our customers. Where do you see these opportunities for mobile devices to make a difference and impact your business? So we definitely want to open that dialogue with you right now. We'll make sure that our emails are part of the deck that goes out so we could start engaging in that dialogue and hearing your guys' ideas of where should DM2 be putting our development effort.
Yeah, the most important thing is that, we Delivery Link and some of these other things are because you guys have already spoken, and we're seeing that those requirements and that movement there in that place. One thing when you're talking to your team and thinking about this, think about mobile deployment, as a way to optimize your order processing, optimize your delivery stream, optimize your inventory controls, as a way to reach out to your customers, all those kinds of things. So you want to begin within your organization, if you haven't already, developing a strategy for mobile deployment within your organization. So that, put some thought into it and let us know what more you'd like to see. And be sure and watch that Sage Vision video. I've watched it like 4 times because it just gets me excited about what's going on, and I do just really highly recommend you check that out. Tom?
Okay, thank you. Nice job, you guys. I wanted to plug next month's webinar. As you know, we've been doing webinars every month now for probably about 18 months straight. The next webinar is going to be on July 13th at 11:30 Pacific Time, 1:30 Central Time, and it's on Equipment Manager. As you know, when you register for our webinars, we always ask you what topics you'd like to see us cover in future webinars, and we've had several requests to cover Equipment Manager. So we invite you to learn about Equipment Manager. You'll find out how it'll help you track where your loaned or leased equipment is, determine if your customers are using your equipment but buying from other marketers, identify whether your customers are meeting their purchase agreements, monitor how many times your loaned or leased equipment has been serviced, and most importantly, measure the return on investment of your loaned and leased equipment. So we invite you to join next month's webinar so you can learn about how easy it is to use Equipment Manager to manage your loaned and leased equipment agreements, track where your equipment is, and measure your return on investment. Before we open it up to questions, I just wanted to, someone made a comment, it's actually Audrey over at Carson, that on the previous slide, that Sage YouTube video, the link is actually covered up by the DM2 logo. As Rob mentioned earlier, we do have a summary slide of where all the links are located. We've got that up right now, so you can see that. When we send out or post the presentation onto our customer content page of our website, I'll make sure that I fix that one slide. And as I said, you know, this is being recorded, so the recording as well as the presentation slide will be put on our website, and I'll send everybody a message. And then shortly after this webinar is over, I'll send out an invite to the Equipment Manager webinar that we're going to be having next month. And now I'll open it up to questions. I addressed Audrey's comment there. The next question is from Sean over at Interstate. He said, I know you said Delivery Link is only 75% developed, but I didn't hear anything about import capabilities into the web portal. He goes on to say, using the common carrier, allowing my carriers to import into the web portal would be a huge win. I don't know if you want to address that, Chris.
Yeah, we are, the actual development of Delivery Link is including a new API that we're going to make available so that third-party carriers can either use Delivery Link themselves to bring the data in, or can provide a file in that format and we can import it into Delivery Link. So we're creating an interface so that we can share publicly, or part of the Delivery Link development is an interface to share publicly with other third-party carrier software developers, that kind of stuff, to bring that data in. Does that answer Sean's question?
Sean, if that doesn't, feel free to email us. You see on the bottom of, or towards the bottom of this slide, you can always email us after the webinar with some more specifics if you have any more questions on that. Next question is actually from Sean again. He's asking about e-signature. Will it have outbox capabilities? For example, drivers get signatures and sent back to my servers, and then I copy a signature and order is in the email or auto fax to the person on file.
Yes.
All
so
right.
You capture the signature, it comes back, and then when you print or outbox the invoice, you can actually have the signature embedded in it. Yes.
All right, great. Next question is from Adam over at Parman. It's regarding truck solutions. Your SmartLogix partnership already handles bulk delivery. Where is that going? Also, will the new Delivery Link product help us handle packaged truck deliveries?
The big difference between a solution like SmartLogix and Delivery Link is that Delivery Link is not going to interface to meters. So there'll be no direct communication between the iPad devices and the metering on the trucks. If you're looking for that kind of solution, SmartLogix is really the best player for that. As far as, this doesn't affect the SmartLogix development. This is strictly Delivery Link is strictly a light version of that. In fact, it's going to use our dispatch scheduler, which isn't as good as what you see with SmartLogix. SmartLogix also has a lot of real-time data feeds off the vehicles that we're not going to get. Our GPS is going to be limited to what's inside the iPad. So it's a low-end option compared to something like a SmartLogix. It's a less of an investment, but doesn't have as much of a capability. As far as the packaged products, I suppose you could. The system is going to be geared for fuel, but you could put anything on it you wanted to. You could send any order out to it you want to, and then say, I delivered this much, and capture signature. Sure, there's no limitation that way. So you know, if you want to talk some more about it, Adam, I'd be glad to do that. But it's really a sister product to SmartLogix solutions. We even see the potential that customers are going to have a mixed environment. So maybe they're using the iPads for some portion of their business, and then they're using the SmartLogix for the other portions of their business. We're primarily going to be aimed at truck and trailer initially, and then looking at fleet fueling and some other things going forward.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Chris. Audrey says thank you about fixing the link to the Sage YouTube video. Sean acknowledged that your previous answer, Chris, as he says, is perfect answer, Chris. Exclamation point, exclamation point. The next question we have is from Wendy over at McPherson. For the CRM Mobility app, what version of CRM is required, and is there a version requirement for the DM2/Sage system?
Okay, Tom, we're going to take those questions and give them to the CRM team, because that answer gets a little bit complex. It kind of depends on what kind of version of CRM, what version of back office, are they integrated, what version of integration. There's different mobility solutions for all those different combinations. So we'll just take down, we know who Wendy is, so we'll have the CRM team contact her directly for that.
Okay, so Wendy, we'll make sure somebody follows up with you after the webinar here. And then Sean just wanted to acknowledge, couldn't ask for more perfect answers to my questions. So nice job there, Chris.
Oh, excellent.
And that is all the questions we, oh, wait, we got one more question slipping in here. And this question is from Ryan. He is asking, is there no app available to put on an iPad for remote access to your ERP data? The remote solution is just to remote into an available remote desktop or terminal service.
Correct. Today there's not a ERP full replication on the iPad devices. There are some things, but go ahead.
Yeah, that was a topic. So Sage has a summit every year, and last year they were having a conversation about this being a development item. So today it is a remote desktop experience, but are they going to develop apps to get direct access to the ERP? We believe this is part of Sage's vision. We just don't have anything to show on it today.
Like we said, the CRM piece and some of that's sort of on the vanguard, so they're feeling out the marketplace. Like I said earlier, when you start having the hockey stick of complexity of an ERP system, you creating that in a mobile experience can be somewhat difficult. That's why we are recommending to people these days that, you know, if Jump can be part of, or Jump-like devices, any kind of RDP, VNC devices can be used in that environment as we define what is a mobile experience of the ERP. And Sage is going through that, as Rob alluded to, and investigating it. But I expect to see some things over the next couple of years for sure.
But I would like to follow up with Ryan. You know, what are those business cases where he sees those opportunities for remote access to the back office?
Sure.
So
actually, Ryan with Hasco did put in another comment. He said we're looking for our sales team to be able to access inventory information. So that's one of his specific business cases.
Well, that's part of the beauty of Sage being the publisher of both the CRM system and the back office. They've got a level of integration between those two systems that you just don't see out in the market with anyone else. So we have the inventory flowing from the ERP into the CRM system. So we have an offering where our sales teams can have access to inventory through CRM. They don't need to have direct access to the back office.
So somebody could contact Ryan and maybe talk with him offline?
Absolutely.
Right.
So Ryan, we'll give you a call.
Okay, and Ryan did say thank you for the previous answer there. Sean has a comment here. Sean with Interstate he's saying, with all the new and exciting information and enhancements that are coming out, when is the next DM2 user conference? And I'll go ahead and respond to that if you guys don't mind.
Yes.
What we've been looking at a couple of options. You know, one of the reasons we held back on having a conference this year is we looked at the attendance and we realized we were really only getting about 12% of the companies that we do business with represented at the user conference. So we realized there's a large number of customers that weren't attending. That's kind of what spawned the whole webinar series. We felt that this was a good way to get information out, make it a little easier for people to access across the country. That being said, we are looking at a couple of options. We are certainly looking at the possibility of bringing the user conference back. And we are also working with customers to determine if a better option might be what we're calling road shows. These would be basically smaller equivalents to the user conference held regionally across the country for a day or two. We thought it might be better to bring the user conference, if you will, to our customers versus making them come out to Vancouver. So those are two options that we're looking at right now, and we're trying to get customer feedback on. So we definitely see the need to have those types of meetings. All right, that looks like it's it for customer or questions that have come in. Ryan says thank you. He says that he knows Interstate likes the face-to-face, and I'm glad you guys are exploring that. And yes, we definitely are looking into that. We realize there's a lot of value in getting customers together to network with not only themselves, but with DM2 and employees and personnel. All right, that looks like it's it for now. I just wanted to remind everybody that today's webinar has been recorded. Once the recording is available, we'll post it along with a copy of today's presentation on the customer content page of our website, and I'll be sending an email around to let everybody know when it's available. If you do think of any other questions that come to mind after the webinar is over, please feel free to email us at sales@dm2.com. I'd like to thank Chris and Rob for doing an excellent job with their presentation, and I'd like to thank everybody for attending today's Go Mobile webinar. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.